So, Strays is the foul-mouthed dog movie, which fits into this camp of comedies that are trying to be subversive by taking a genre or a story that's typically associated with like a family film, and making it more adult. But by making it more adult, it essentially just means, more profanity, more bodily fluids, more sex jokes, more vulgarity. And that kind of becomes, all that the film has to offer. So this Strays fits into that camp of films like Sausage Party and the Happy Time Murders, where it was all about, taking a convention usually associated with family films, and then just kind of like, snipping the wires that usually like constrain it to a PG rating. So characters will get to swear all they want. They'll get to talk about sex. They'll get to have sex. They'll, get to show poop, get to show bodily fluids, all the gross stuff that you typically wouldn't be able to do. And on one level, sure, like it's freeing. Like I understand the appeal for that, just having like a film that's very divergent from what you usually expect. But there's like a question that I usually ask with these types of films that want to be like adult and subversive of this nature, which is that if you were to trim down the vulgarity and take out a lot of like the sex jokes and the grotesqueness of it, would it still be an adult film? And usually the answer with these type of films is no. And that's actually what Strays ends up being. It ends up being fairly derivative of like a lot of other dog movies that you might have seen. And it just kind of just peppers it with, not even just peppers it, just like slathers it in all the vulgarity to make sure that it's going to be an R-rated film and raunchy, and it's like, like this ain't your daddy's doggy movie, and that's really all it has to offer. And on that level, if that's all you're seeking, you'll probably like the film. But if you want something more and you're used to like a lot of like the adult vulgarity of like an R rating, there's not a lot here. Like, I don't want to generalize and say like only, teenagers who want a divergent film are probably going to love it, but that's kind of what it comes off of. So stop me if you've heard this before. So the premise is that Reggie, a dog who's voiced by Will Ferrell, is in a toxic relationship with his owner, Doug, played by Will Forte. And their relationship it's a toxic one. Like, Doug is a guy he was unfaithful to his girlfriend. His life's a wreck. He spends all his time getting stoned. He tries to get rid of the dog. He insults the dog all the time. But because Reggie doesn't have enough of a perception about the human world, he just assumes that this is the way all relationships are. So he thinks that every time that Doug tries to get Reggie out of his life, it's just a test of like his faith to prove that he's a good boy, and that if he just keeps coming back to his master, that he'll finally find love. And unfortunately, like he comes to that realization later when he's abandoned in the city, and he's visited by other dogs, including Bug, played by Jamie Foxx, who's just just an uproarious stray of the streets. There's Hunter, who is a therapy dog, voiced by Randall Park, who's a little nervous, a little neurotic. And then there's Maggie, voiced by Ilsa Fisher, who mostly just wants attention and to like be acknowledged. And they basically, Maggie and Hunter kind of have a will they won't they relationship going on. And Bug has a little bit of pathos for being abandoned on the street after his experience with an owner went south. So once Reggie, after, having a night out on the town, like eating scraps and digging out of dumpsters and humping stuff and making all kinds of the typical dog gags that you typically associate with this type of comedy, he comes to the realization that Doug is a terrible owner and that he wants to get revenge on Doug. And his idea of revenge is to bite his genitals off. And the film kind of delivers on that promise. So on one level, I kind of do have to acknowledge that Strays does deliver what it promises. It, like I said, it lays out this plot about Doug wanting revenge on a toxic relationship and being determined to bite a particular part of the male anatomy, and he does indeed do that. So it's like, kind of like watching this film is like, like that scene in Arrested Development, where everything the film is labeled as, you still open the bag and you're just like, I don't know what I was expecting, but there it is. I know that's going to be like a big defense of the film. It's like, well, it didn't really set its sights that high. What more can you expect from the film? But here's the thing about Strays. There actually is a very clever moment in this film where I actually did kind of smirk at the screen, almost a laugh. I was trying, like I was hoping for something to make me laugh here. And there's one moment where it came close, which is they do a great parody of this 2017 film called A Dog's Journey, in which this dog keeps getting reincarnated, and the story is told through his eyes of basically growing up with his master and trying to help him find love. It's an incredibly corny movie. It's not very good. And Josh Gad does the voice of the dog and basically like tells us all about this heartwarming romance. They actually get, this film, Strays, actually gets Josh Gad to voice that same dog character, and they do kind of riff on it a bit. Like, the characters will come by and they'll just say like, oh, it's a narrator dog, no one cares about him. And Josh Gad actually gets in a good jab by manipulating the dialogue. So, like, he's not actually telling the story of a romance, but the story of a serial killer. And it's like, and nobody would listen to the dog, but he was trying to tell you that's a serial killer. And it's like, that's a pretty funny moment. And it's like, if the rest of the film had been like that, not just making fun of A Dog's Purpose, but like all the other dog type films, like, you know, it could like make fun of like Lassie and Homeward Bound and Old Yeller, and just like them passing by all like these vignettes on their wild road trip. That actually could have been really funny and fairly subversive, and more to the point, it would be more satirical to like the dog films that this type of movie is trying to subvert. But unfortunately, in its place, we get basically every dog joke that you could make in an R-rated movie. So, like, you know, jokes about humping, jokes about, you know, how dogs perceive fireworks, jokes about wanting to be called a good boy, tail wagging sizes, you know, you name it. You can go down the list, you know, dogs pooping, you know, dogs demanding the attention of humans. And it goes down the list. And it really reveals something. I think by like the midway point of the film, where they have this big montage of like all these dogs pooping so that they can make a jail escape, and then at one point trying to use like an erect part of the body to make their escape. It becomes clear, like, okay, this is like, you can feel like the ceiling of this concept being slammed into, about how many gags you can do with dogs by that point. And by the time the film exhausts that element of the film, it just falls back on just profanity at that point. It's like, isn't it funny that Jamie Foxx keeps, you know, saying the F word and that the other characters keep using it? Isn't it funny how Will Ferrell will improv this dog to say wildly inappropriate stuff for being naive about the world, and that's really all it has to offer at that point. And I was thinking about, you know, like, because you know, like the marketing for this film has been all about, you know, stressing, oh, it's about time that we got an R-rated dog movie, or, you know, a film that actually does more than just like, you know, like the typical family dog movie. But the thing is that there actually was a fairly adult film involving a dog, which was I believe it's called White God. And it's essentially like, I thought about that film when I was watching Strays, because White God is all about this dog who's abused and abandoned on the streets and tries to find his way back to his master, but while doing so grows to hate humanity and despise it, and basically leads all these other dogs on a violent rampage of just destroying humanity while he finds his way back to his master. And it's a fairly surreal film, but like it's devoid of like any, you know, like there's no like inner monologue of the dog or anything, like, and it's treated very dark and emotional, and it's surprisingly effective. Like, I actually kind of love that film. Like, so it's like, if you actually want kind of like more of an adult dog film, I would say go see White God, because Strays is the same deal as like Sausage Party and Happy Time Murders. It's taking this thing usually associated with kids movies and just slathers it with all these adult jokes, which is basically just like, here's all the vulgar stuff that you couldn't do in a dog movie. And like I said, if that's all you're expecting, because I know a lot of people are probably going to like the film on that merit alone, but when I think of all the other raunchy films I've seen that have been able to do way more subversive stuff, Strays just comes up short, especially for the fact that, they do a parody of A Dog's Purpose, which is a film that also starred Randy Quaid. And Strays also has Randy Quaid making a cameo appearance. And you would think, like, it's the perfect opportunity. Like, why couldn't you do more with Randy Quaid? Sorry, Dennis Quaid. I should preference that. Dennis Quaid was in Life. It would be a much different film if Randy Quaid was in A Dog's Purpose. But yes, like, Dennis Quaid is in this film. And you have the perfect opportunity for him to have more of a bit with A Dog's Purpose, and they don't take advantage of that. And I would say that's a plus because they're not relying on the same joke. But this is a film that could do to satirize more of the other dog films the way that it did with A Dog's Purpose. Like, to me, that's the funniest part of the film because, like, it's aware of the genre that it's trying to, subvert throughout this film. And it never goes back to that. It always just feels like it's just trying to stage like, on paper, it's an okay story about, a dog trying to get over a toxic relationship. I'm sure there are some people who probably relate this to a film we had later this year, Renfield. Even though, like Renfield at least did like an okay job of balancing the darkness with the absurdity of it. So you're kind of like teetering between feeling bad for Renfield and laughing about his plight being exaggerated. But there isn't a lot of that with Strays. In fact, for like the first act of the film, you feel so bad for Reggie that all the absurdity of having Will Forte kind of be abusive and like shout at this dog is deeply uncomfortable to watch. We're just like, okay, I get it, like Reggie's unaware that he has a terrible master, but this guy is really bad. And then of course when you get to the end of the film, it just exaggerates him to a degree where he's gonna kill some dogs. And again, that's an aspect that you would see in a kid's dog movie, and the only difference is just like he swears more and the dogs will bite a guy's genitals, but more like a little bit more overtly where you can see like blood and like they add some poop into the mix. So, well, like I said, it's just slathering on all these grotesque elements to make it seem more adult when it's the same. It's The Secret Life of Pets. It's Homeward Bound. It's White God. It's A Dog's Purpose. All these films mashed together and just given like an adult coding to make it seem more subversive. And it's just, in addition to just not being funny, it's just like it's fairly mean most of the time and just deeply cynical, where it's like even if you're trying to get into like the raunchy nature of the comedy, it feels hard because the film is trying so hard to make it feels like it's trying to make it funny by making it more mean, that by the time you get to the more emotional moments in this film, like when Reggie feels like compelled to just continue the relationship, or a fairly heartwarming moment where like they find a lost Girl Scout, it's hard to appreciate those moments just because all of it is built on the back of just having these characters be very, just slinging profanity and poop and piss all over the place. And it just relies on that. Like a lot of scenes will just like linger and let like the dialogue improvise while just you watch like the pee and the poop. So it's like, so it feels like less like the vulgarity is like the frosting here, and more of like the more of like the meat here. And like the dialogue is saying like, oh, I'm so glad like we're pissing on each other's. It's like a friendship pact, and it's like, isn't it great? And the dialogue will just like linger like that for like another 30 seconds to a minute while you're watching the dogs piss. And it's it's not that fun because like you realize in this scene the humorous nature of it is not coming from the dialogue here. It's coming from the piss. you're supposed to be laughing at the dogs peeing on each other, and there's only so long that you can laugh at pee and poop before it loses its allure. And it gets so tiresome after a while, where the bulk of the joke is just saying the F word or just saying the word penis over and over, hoping to get a laugh out of that. And on that level, having seen so many films that are raunchy and do manage to say something more with their material and actually make their emotional arc hit better, Strays is just it's just a film that just gets lost in all in its vulgarity, and it never recovers from that. This is just such a deeply irritating film.